Oh no, that zombie is gonna get that deer. I can't let that happen. Oh no, that zombie's gonna get that deer. I can't let that happen. Seriously? Oh no, that zombie's gonna get that deer. I can't let that happen. Oh no, that zombie's gonna get that deer. I can't let that happen. Hey, thanks for tuning in to Twang and Bang. It doesn't have to be a zombie apocalypse for you to potentially find yourself in a situation where a bow might be the best way to provide food for yourself and your family. This has caught on as a concept in the past 10 years to the point where we've seen an explosion in the number of bows designed to survive stuff hits the fan so you can survive stuff hits the fan. This is the Tactical Survival Bow from Survival Archery Systems. And it's one such bow. It folds down to a total length of 21 inches, so it'll fit in a standard day pack. And what makes it unique amongst survival bows is that it has protected storage inside the riser for 3 complete takedown arrows. And that's why it's coming up next on Twang and Bang. The Survival Archery Systems Tactical Survival Bow is a compact folding longbow designed to fit in an average day pack. It comes in its own multicam carrying case that also doubles as a quiver. The case can be carried by its own straps or easily lashed to any MOLLE load-bearing system. The riser and limb brackets are aluminum, treated prior to anodizing to get its dull, non-reflective surface. This special treatment also allows better paint and water transfer adhesion should you wish to camo the bow yourself. The composite limbs are made in the US and available in 45, 50, and 55-pound drawaways, which is indicated right on the limbs. The 55-pound limbs that I'm using are capable of arrow speeds up to 200 feet per second and generate plenty of kinetic energy to take game as large as an African wildebeest. The SAS bow weighs only 2.2 pounds, though it's unique in the survival bow world in that it has integral arrow storage. The riser can store up to 3 complete takedown arrows secured by caps on both ends. This not only keeps you from breaking or bending arrows during transport or rough handling, but it also ensures that the vanes remain straight for accurate flight immediately after assembly. Strings and other small items can also be stored in the riser, though it's not necessary when using the included carrying case. Marine grade 316 stainless steel is used for the bracket retention pins with nylon bolts to hold them in place during assembly. The upper limb is stored opposite the lower limb to get the bow under a 21-inch folded length. No tools are required to remove and replace the limb in its shooting position, as the nylon bolts only need to be snugged finger tight. In fact, the nylon bolts aren't actually necessary at all for the bow to function, as pressure from the limbs when strung will hold the bracket pins in place even while shooting. However, the bolts do help keep the pins in place while stringing the bow as well as during storage, so be sure not to lose them. The SAS bow comes with a bare weather rest, which despite its low tech is probably the most popular arrow rest in traditional archery. After cleaning the surface of the riser, stick the bottom edge of the rest about 1/2 inch above the grip tape, with its rearmost edge meeting the rear radius of the riser. It gets a little tricky here, I'm going to tell you right now. This is not as easy to string as other bows, but it's the same basic process. You just have to keep in mind that these are going to keep moving until they're under load of the string. And we had to string it before we can measure the brace height, set the brace height, and then put the knock point on. As with all other bowstrings, this is just a basic bowstring. You've got a big loop and a little loop. The big loop will go over the top limb. Make sure it's pointing towards the back of the bow. The little loop is going to come down, and you're going to make sure it's seated in the notch on the lower limb. Keep some tension on it to keep the limbs from flopping around. You're going to step through. Make sure you keep the lower limb tip out of the dirt. You want to put it kind of on your instep. And you're going to use your thigh or your butt to support the riser as you bend the top limb and you get the big loop seated in the notch. Be very careful with this end. You don't want this coming loose and popping you in the eye. It's best to wear some kind of safety glasses, but just keep it away from your eye. And so Now you check to make sure it's centered and seated, and then we're going to measure the brace height. You're not necessarily going to have a ruler out in the world, so you need to learn how to measure things with different body parts. That's 9 inches all the way to the crook of my thumb is 7 inches, which is actually where we need to have the brace height set at. The brace height, according to SAS, is from the edge of the riser to the string, and I have got that, actually it's just under 7 inches. So I've got to tighten the string a bit by twisting it, and then that's going to put more preload on the bow, and it'll bring the string a little bit away from the riser. I'm going to do that now. And for this, it's just easier to pull the big loop off of the top limb and twist it righty-tighty, and then place it back. Okay, that looks good. Now we're going to set the nock point. When you open a brand new pack of arrows, you might find that the nocks are not aligned with the index vein, but it's an easy fix. You'll see on a nock there's going to be a rib or something like that, so in the dark you can feel your nock and you know which part needs to go on the outside of the bow. But here you can see it's not even aligned with any of the veins. So what we're going to do is we're going to nock it on the string with that rib up, and then we're just going to twist until everything's aligned and we're good to go. Now, to find the nock point on this bow, I've played around with it a bit, and there are a couple different styles of setting a nock point, but with this, because of where the rest is and shooting 3 fingers, turns out having this at a 90-degree perpendicular to the riser at rest is where you want the arrow to be. You might have to tune it later. If you're getting erratic flight, you might have to move the nock up or down, but that's where I'm going to want to nock the arrow every time, given what I've been playing around with it so far. These nocks are teeny, and doing this out in the woods like this is kind of crazy, but I've got more. I've got plenty of these. They do make nock pliers, which are perfect for setting up a nock, but since I want to do this the way I would do it without having special tools, I'm going to show you that you can use regular needle nose pliers. All you're going to do is pinch it down a little bit, and now we can get the arrow out of the way, and you're going to want to close it very gently, just little squeezes in a circle to try to get that end done, and you'll do a little bit more squeezing. Harder and harder as you get that closed. There we go. Okay, so it's not as beautiful as it would be if I actually use nock pliers, because they're round and they would squeeze this into a nice circle. But especially on a string like this, it's not going to be under 100 pounds of tension. It's not a speed bow or anything like that. That's going to be fine. And I'm looking at it, you'll see there's a rubber insert inside the brass. You want to make sure that the brass is not touching the serving anywhere, because that could cut it. But I did not do that anywhere, so that's good to go. Perfect shot. That's great. I'm getting better. This is a perishable skill for sure, and a lot of my skill seems to have perished since the last time I shot traditional archery. There are a couple things though in shooting this that I noticed right away that distinguish this from other bows like it. First is the almost complete lack of stacking. Stacking is a really bad thing because it's very inefficient. What that is, it's typically with straight limb bows. You might have a very easy draw, and then you get to that peak draw weight only at the end, and it's very suddenly right at that full draw length. So you have all this work of holding, say, 55 pounds back
but very little of that 55 pounds is going into the arrow on its way to the game animal or target or whatever. The ways in medieval times they got rid of stacking was with very, very long limbs, because then the limbs didn't have to bend that far for the same amount of draw length, so you didn't have stacking. We also invented recurves. It split the load between two different curves so that you would have a nice steady draw weight as you pulled the bow back. But SAS managed to do it with modern materials and design. The composite of the limbs, their grind, as well as the ratio of the limbs to the riser seems to have solved that problem. There's very little stacking with this straight limb bow. Of course, you're not going to see a folding recurve because recurve limbs won't fold flat, but this does a very, very good job of getting rid of the most common problem with straight limbs. The second thing that I noticed is that there's actually a little bit more of an archer's paradox to this bow than bows that have a cutout for the arrow shelf. And what that is, when you knock an arrow, it sits off to the side, so it's going to come off of the string at an angle, and then it's going to fishtail. The paradox in archer's paradox is that it's easier to hit something instinctively farther away from you than close to you, because close to you, your aiming point is going to shift back and forth left and right until that arrow stabilizes. The closer to a shoot through rest that you get, the less of that fishtailing you have, and the shorter that range of that archer's paradox you're going to experience. This has a little bit more of that range than a bow with a cutout for an arrow rest, but I don't find it too bad. It's just something that you need to be aware of, something you need to practice for, and it's something you need to factor into your setup on game animals. Perfect shot. I'm getting better at this. I am. Well, the bow can shoot better than I can. There's no question about that. It's a very sweet shooting survival bow. But can it survive so you make the shot when you need to? Survival Archery Systems does not make the claim that this bow can handle the weight of a truck. This is soft, loamy soil, but I just wanted to give it an extreme crush test to do way more than you're ever going to do to it sitting in a pack, like literally sitting on the bow with it in a pack. If it can handle this, it's going to handle anything reasonable that might happen and stuff hits the fan. It's sandy, there's no question. It's covered in sand. But the limbs look fine, and there's no crushing whatsoever to the riser. Heck, even the bare rest is doing fine. I think that's a pass. The biggest complaint that I've seen about this bow is the time and complexity it takes to go from its folded form to its shootable form. And I think that those are valid observations. But I also think the manufacturer has a point. One that I can back up with decades of hunting myself, and that is shots of opportunity are not going to present themselves in a way that will let you put any of the survival bows together, then knock an arrow with a broadhead on the end, then harvest your animal, and there's your dinner. If you want to be ready for shots of opportunity, you need to have your bow together. I don't care which model you go for. And so that's why Survival Archery Systems decided to go with this design, so that they could get the total length when folded down to 21 inches. It'll fit in a standard day pack, so that you could get protected storage for up to 3 takedown arrows. It'll be up to you to decide whether the trade-off is worth it, but for me, I am definitely on the side of the manufacturer on this, at least when it comes to the shots of opportunity thing. I really don't see myself walking through the woods without my bow ready to go if I am on the hunt. If you want to learn more about the SAS Tactical Survival Bow, be sure to read my full written review. You can see it linked in the video description below. You can also see it at my website at TWANGnBANG.net. Be sure to follow me on Facebook and Instagram. You can see the links right here to see what I'm doing in between videos. And be sure to click right here to subscribe so you can catch my next videos on bows, guns, and other cool stuff. I really appreciate you watching Twang and Bang, and I hope to see you next time.